Picture this. After years of delays, billions spent, and a national mission to challenge Boeing and Airbus, China's homegrown passenger jet, the C919, has finally taken to the skies. It's meant to symbolize independence, a declaration that Beijing can compete in one of the most demanding industries on the planet. But now, reports say the United States may block exports of the very engines that keep the C919 flying. Without them, China's aviation dream could stall within just a few years. And the stakes couldn't be higher. On one side, Washington holds the ability to cripple China's jet program with a single export ban. On the other, Beijing is determined to break free from Western control, while Moscow quietly hints it could step in. Could Russia really become China's fallback option? Or is this just geopolitical theater? Before we dive into this high-stakes clash of engines, sanctions, and power politics, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an analysis on how global rivalries are reshaping technology and industry. Now, let's get into it. To understand why the engine issue is so critical, we need to rewind and look at what the C919 actually is, and why it matters so much to China. For decades, the narrow-body passenger jet market has been dominated by two giants, Boeing in the United States and Airbus in Europe. Together, they control more than 90% of global sales. These single-aisle aircraft, like the Boeing 737 and Airbus A320, are the true workhorses of aviation, flying short and medium-haul routes and transporting millions of passengers every year. China, with its massive population and rapidly expanding middle class, became one of the world's largest aviation markets almost overnight. By 2035, analysts expect China will need more than 8,000 new planes worth over $1 trillion. For Beijing, allowing foreign companies to dominate such a strategic industry wasn't acceptable. This wasn't just business. This was about national pride, technological independence, and reducing reliance on the West. That's why the C919 was created. Built by state-owned COMAC, it was announced in 2008 as China's answer to Boeing and Airbus. The mission sounded simple: design a modern single-aisle jet that could serve China's huge domestic market and eventually challenge Western competitors. But in reality, it was far more complicated. Building a commercial jet is among the hardest engineering undertakings in the world. Every system, from avionics to hydraulics, must meet strict international safety standards. Certification takes years, and reliability must be demonstrated through thousands of hours of rigorous testing. For a newcomer like COMAC, the challenge was massive. Even so, China pushed ahead. The first prototype rolled out in 2015, and the aircraft flew for the first time in 2017. Progress was slow, troubled by delays, testing issues, and supply chain bottlenecks. Deliveries originally promised by 2021 slipped repeatedly. When the C919 finally entered service in 2023 with China Eastern Airlines, it marked a symbolic milestone. Beijing celebrated it as proof China could stand beside the aerospace giants. The first routes were domestic, linking cities like Shanghai and Chengdu. Passengers described the jet as modern and comfortable, comparable to Western models. By mid-2024, the aircraft had logged thousands of flight hours and carried over 100,000 passengers. COMAC claimed a backlog of more than 1,000 orders, mostly from Chinese airlines. But here's the problem. The C919 isn't truly made in China. Its most essential component, the engine, comes from the West. The aircraft relies on the LEAP-1C, an advanced turbofan built by CFM International, a joint venture between GE and Safran. This same engine powers the Boeing 737 MAX and Airbus A320neo. No LEAP-1C means no C919. COMAC can design the fuselage, assemble the airframe, and integrate systems. But without engines, the plane can't fly. And every engine is subject to United States export approval, meaning Washington can block deliveries whenever it chooses. And it doesn't stop with engines. Much of the C919's avionics, flight controls, and onboard systems come from Western suppliers like Rockwell Collins, Honeywell, Parker Aerospace, and Liebherr. Analysts estimate that as much as 60% of the jet's components are foreign-made. That makes the C919 extremely vulnerable. With U.S.-China tensions rising, Washington could easily turn aviation exports into a pressure tool. Beijing understands this, which is why it has spent billions trying to create its own alternatives. But designing a world-class turbofan engine is one of the hardest engineering challenges out there. Even Russia, with decades of aerospace experience, still struggles to match Western reliability and efficiency. For now, the C919's dependence on GE and Safran remains its biggest weakness. That's why the latest reports of a potential U.S. suspension of engine deliveries have shaken China's aviation plans. If the supply is cut, the entire program could slow to a crawl. But why would Washington take such a drastic step? To understand that, we have to zoom out to the larger U.S.-China rivalry. On the surface, the C919 looks like just another commercial jet. But in reality, it sits squarely at the center of global power competition. For Washington, control over aerospace technology is a major strategic advantage. American companies dominate the supply chain, and export licenses give the U.S. enormous leverage. And this isn't hypothetical. It has happened before. Back in 2020, the U.S. briefly considered blocking GE from supplying LEAP-1C engines to COMAC, arguing it could weaken America's lead in aviation technology. After pressure from GE, the approval was granted. But the message was unmistakable: supply is never guaranteed. That uncertainty has returned, reminding Beijing that its flagship jet program is built on a fragile foundation. In effect, Washington holds the keys to China's aerospace future. Of course, Beijing has leverage too. Rare earth materials, critical for electronics and defense systems, are processed mostly in China, and Beijing has shown it's willing to hint at restrictions when pushed. The result is a high-stakes standoff. The U.S. can target aviation technology, while China can squeeze essential resources. This tug-of-war makes the C919 more than an airplane. It becomes a symbol of national strength. For China, it's about proving it can compete with Boeing and Airbus. For the U.S., it's about slowing a rising challenger. That's why, American officials are hesitant to support engine sales indefinitely. Every set of engines China receives helps it gain experience and climb the learning curve. Meanwhile, Beijing is trying to develop its own engine, the CJ1000A. And this is where Russia quietly enters the scene. With Moscow cut off from Western markets, offering its PD-14 engines to China could deepen ties and reduce U.S. influence. The question is whether Russian engines can truly fill the gap. If Washington does restrict engine exports, COMAC would face major trouble. Production would stall, with completed airframes sitting unused. Analysts say China's engine stockpile would last only 2 to 3 years. After that, Chinese airlines would have little choice but to continue relying on Boeing and Airbus. But sanctions work both ways. GE and Safran would lose billions in business, and airlines worldwide would feel the impact from reduced competition. Fewer aircraft options almost always mean higher costs for carriers and ultimately passengers. And there's another risk. Cutting off engines might actually accelerate China's push for self-reliance. We've seen it happen before. Restrictions on semiconductors, telecom gear, and computing only sped up Beijing's determination to innovate. In the long run, Washington could unintentionally push China to succeed even faster. Meanwhile, Russia's PD-14, though less efficient and lacking global certification, could at least keep the C919 flying within China and friendly markets. And deeper cooperation between Beijing and Moscow could create a more united front against the U.S. That's the paradox. Short-term pain for China could evolve into long-term strategic loss for Washington. So what are China's real options? Externally, Russia's PD-14 offers a temporary lifeline. Internally, the CJ1000A is the longer-term path to independence. But both routes come with major challenges. Installing the Russian engine would require redesigns, recertification, and years of testing. Without international approval, C919s powered by PD-14s would be limited to non-Western markets. The CJ-1000A, meanwhile, is making progress with prototypes and ground tests, with potential flight trials in the coming years. But certification, reliability, and global trust remain major hurdles. Western companies refine their engines over decades. China is trying to achieve that in a fraction of the time. Still, China's determination is clear. As seen with high-speed rail and electric vehicles, Beijing is willing to invest heavily and play the long game. The C919, even if not fully independent yet, is a step toward that future. The reality is this: Russia's PD-14 can keep things afloat for now. The CJ-1000A could eventually unlock independence, but for the moment, China remains exposed. This isn't a quick story of triumph or failure. It's a long, tough race. The US holds the advantage today, but China is planning for tomorrow. And that's what makes this aviation showdown so fascinating. It's not just about who builds the better plane. It's about patience, strategy, and who controls the skies in the decades to come. If you want to keep following how this evolving contest shapes technology, politics, and global power, be sure to subscribe. This story is only beginning, and the next chapter will be even more dramatic. Thanks for watching, and if you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing for more. Until next time, stay inspired.